pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Good evening. You just start right into it then.
Okay, so we're here to discuss the article, Water and Sewer, that is proposing for the special town meeting for funding for tying the Housing Authority and the Yale School and High School into town sewer. So this map here illustrates the project, and this is a detail of the project here. And we do have our engineer here tonight who can explain the details of it, but to hit the high points quickly, because I know we've got kind of short time tonight. The reason why we're proposing to do this is that we've spoken to both the schools and to the Housing Authority, and they're spending about $100,000 a year each just to keep their existing systems up and running, all the various costs associated with them, with pumping of the septic systems on the Housing Authority property, keeping the tangle of existing lines between the high school and the Yale School going up to the middle school, and then keeping the middle school plant running. All of that's costing each entity about $100,000 a year. If we bond this project, the cost would be, the annual cost would be a little bit less. So it wouldn't be a burden on the taxpayers, or at least based on our estimates. And right now we are really scrambling to get this project in for town meetings. So based on our current estimates, it should cost a few $1,000s less a year than what the current budget is in order to bring these properties on sewer. And that includes everything. That's the bond cost, the interest, and the actual cost to put wastewater into the sewer system, so the sewer rate charges and associated costs. So that's why we're here. We're looking for the ability to borrow or otherwise finance the project, recognizing that it's looks like it will fit into the current budgets as they are today. So if you like, I can get Fran Yanuskiewicz, he's our engineer, to explain the project in a little bit additional detail, what's flowing where and how it's all going to work.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. I'll try to make this brief, but so you understand what it is we're proposing to do. And as Diane said, as we go back a little bit, the Housing Authority really started this process. They came to the Water and Sewer Commission with money in hand because their system has failed, and they need to repair their septic system, and the only way to repair it, given the size of the flow, is with a treatment plant. So they would have to build another treatment plant in the town just to serve their property at Woodland Meadows, which we've looked at right now as the extent of this project area. Because again, they're bringing money to the table from a funding agency. So they started the discussion here, actually a little bit earlier than I think the Water and Sewer Board planned on doing anything. But obviously it makes some sense to take advantage of grant money from an outside source. So actually what has happened is they had an engineer who developed a couple of different options as far as trying to get from Housing Authority to the Wheaton Pump Station, or the Town Center Pump Station, I should say, which is located here. And what this is proposed to do, it's a little bit different from the overall town plan that we've laid out in the CWMP, and by which a new pump station would be built right at the Housing Authority. So that would be the low point, if you will, for this project. It is not the low point on West Main Street, but it would be the low point here, pumping up to a high point at about, about 600, 800 feet after Freeman Street, the high point in West Main, and then flowing completely by gravity the rest of the way to Wheaton. So really, it's one pump station that gets added here. And what we've done as well is a little bit different than the Housing Authority did when they put some rough numbers together. They basically said, we want to get from point A to point B. We don't really care about anybody in the middle. So obviously the Water and Sewer Board cares about the middle, and they also care about economic development on West Main Street. So in areas where there would be just a force main or a pressure main pumping from the pump station up to east of Freeman Street, we would also put a gravity sewer going back. So if you take a line starting from the Housing Authority to the center of town and down to Wheaton, everybody would have gravity sewer service, including the two schools. The high school and the Yale School would have gravity sewer service. Now, at around the same time the Housing Authority came in, the school department came in. They do have, in fact, some issues, and I'm not sure if anybody is here from the school department. They do have some issues operationally with their wastewater plant at the middle school. They are going to have to do some work to get it to snuff and to meet permit. I'd rather not go into details on that. And they have talked to the commission as well. They're extremely pleased with how the LG North School sewering turned out. They really would rather not be in the sewer business and running a treatment plant. And they came forward to say, you know, can we do something about, at least in the interim, the high school and the Yale School? Probably understand that about 2012 or thereabouts, the Yale School and high school were actually started pumping to the treatment plant at the middle school through the 4-inch main that was put in even 6 years before that. So it was done around 2006, 2007, when West Main Street was paved. And they made use of that line to bring flow from, again, the high school and Yale School to that plant. One of the problems with that is that the waste that's coming out of those two facilities is septic waste, and that is exacerbating their operational problems at the middle school plant. So in talking to Joe Baeta and Wade, one of the things they would really like to do is to get that flow out and go back to the way it was running. Even though it was very low flow, it was meeting permit. And obviously, when you're dealing with DEP and a permit, that's paramount to make sure that that works. So we've generated costs to do this, and unfortunately, there's some one-time expenses that are really high here. One of the things that we will have to do is to put a gravity line on the Wheaton property. We're not picking up anybody for about 1,400 feet of pipe that would go from Taunton Ave down Fillmore to the existing gravity sewer. So we're putting in a bunch of pipe that just basically moves flow. That's part A. Part B is we're also picking up the entire area of West Main, and we're in a state highway. If you know anything about doing pipe work in a state highway, there are compaction issues that are addressed with controlled density fill. Extremely expensive to do that. It's basically to prevent settlement in a state highway. It's part of the regulation. Now, we haven't looked at it, but there's a possibility, because this is still really early in the game, there's a possibility of getting a waiver for that, but then you've got very strict compaction requirements, 6-inch lifts, so that you don't get settlement in a state highway. So the actual location within the state highway, you've got a 60-foot wide right-of-way. We also need to look at other utilities to see if we can get it off the roadway. If we're off the roadway, those compaction requirements go away, as do a lot of the costs. So right now, I know Bernie was talking to Michelle today, and originally we thought, well, we're just going to deal with the stuff in the public way. The project cost that was provided to Michelle today was $2.9 million for this whole thing. Very expensive, again, because of the level of work, the CDF, the extra pipe, or not the extra pipe, the pipe that really doesn't serve anybody needs to be done. However, in talking a little bit later in the day to the commission, they would like to see the cost for this pump station included as well. So then that brings the cost up to about $3.3 million.
And which pump station is that? That's the one?
That's the one at the Housing Authority.
Okay.
So, go ahead. I don't know if you want to take questions now, or?
Well, I just want to, before I lose.
Sure.
The pump station, the basis of the pump station is for the Norton Housing Authority. Is that a fact?
In part.
Portion.
The biggest portion
And
is.
we're running is for the Norton House. They must have the biggest flow. They've got to have more flow than the high school and the Yale School,
They do.
okay? So we're picking up, what's their input into the, well, you know, what cards do they have on the table? All
As-
this free cash you said they came along with.
As I said,
What that equate to?
we've been, go ahead, Diane.
Yeah, if I could. Now, we have to, the funding picture that they present to us changes, but today, we understand that they have about $1.1 million. And there is, the design work for this project is, you can't roll that into a 30-year bond. It could be rolled into a 20-year bond if it's with the construction, or if it's on its own, it could be funded over 5 years, or preferably paid up front. And so we're looking to take advantage of the money that they have to pay a chunk of this project up front, and then that is what would enable the remainder of the project to be done.
Well, what's the spread? What's the split? The town of Norton versus the Northern Housing Authority? It looks like you got 3.3 million is what you're looking for. They've
Yes.
got 1 million.
1.1.
Okay.
1.1.
All right, let's say they got a third of the project,
Right.
but what portion of it is for them? Are they 50%? Are they 60%?
It's about, let's see, the total gallons a day is right now about 10,900, so about 11,000 gallons a day between the schools, the two schools, and the housing
No,
authority.
but I mean, what
And the
percent,
housing authority portion is 7,000 gallons of it.
what's the portion of the project cost directly related to the housing authority? You talk
Okay.
3.3, they got 1.1.
Yes.
Okay, so the other 2.2 has to be picked up by the town.
Well, yes and
Yes and, well,
yes and
where does it come
no.
from?
Okay, it comes from the difference between, they're spending money today on maintaining their septic system, a lot of money today.
That's fine.
In the future, it will be, that money will be used to pay for the bond, okay, which is what we're asking Norton to use its borrowing authority for, right? But the cash to pay for the bond will be coming out of that operating budget, plus it will also pay for their sewer fees. And as far as the extent of the project, right, as Fran pointed out, we're starting with, at the housing authority property, and bringing that line to the center of town, to the center lift station. So you could make a case that the entire project, if the housing authority were the only ones to benefit from this, would be responsible for the entire.
I would understand that.
For the
Okay,
entire project.
I know the math. All I'm
Yes.
saying is, we're paying 2/3, they're paying 1/3,
Oh, can I jump in?
okay? Because you-
Maybe I can
Perhaps you
clarify.
can explain.
What I want to do
it,
is, I don't want to
yes.
dance the numbers around.
But it's not
I don't
really
want
true.
anything out in the cloud.
Okay.
There's nothing in the cloud right
Good,
now.
a good point. Actually, the actual ratio has not been worked out of what that percentage should be.
Okay.
The 1.1 million that they're bringing to the table was not to put a sewer in the ground. The 1.1 million they're bringing in is, 1.1 million was to put a treatment plant in at that site, okay? Their engineer, and I'm just going to give you some facts, and this is all going to be factored into how much goes where, and the actual allocation, and which really needs to be worked out. Their engineer had come up with a cost just to get them all in, and actually not following the roadway, cutting through the high school, cutting through the Yale School, really the most inexpensive way of building this thing, with no paving in State Highway, doesn't pick up any other properties,
If it was possible to
if it
do.
was possible to do that. And their number was around 2 million to do that, when they only have 1.1. So if you wanted to look at it that way, you could almost say that, well, for them, it's 2/3. But they were also going to be picking up the high school and the Yale School along the way. The one benefit of this plan is it picks up all the properties on Route 123, between the Housing Authority and the Town Center.
So they're saying they're gonna be able to, if they did this on their own, they're saying they have 1.1 million. They're gonna build their own sewer treatment plant there for 1.1 million. And on a yearly basis, how much are they gonna need to operate it?
It's probably about $100,000 a year.
At least $100,000 a year. So are they gonna be paying us $100,000 a year going forward for sewer fees
They're, g-
from the 2.2 million that we're putting up to, So if we didn't include them at all, they'd be spending 1.1 million plus $100,000 a year.
Correct.
Now, if we put the 2.2 up, now we've just spent $2 million, and what do we get out of it? How much per year?
from,
How,
you would, well, obviously, two pieces. There's the capital portion, and how much of that capital they would be paying, which, as I said, is yet to be determined what that actual percentage would be.
Okay.
Okay?
They're gonna be
That's part A.
Okay.
They're also going to pay based on actual use. So whatever flow they put in the pipe, they're going to pay annual charges just like anybody else today that's tied into town sewer. So they would become a user, just like anybody
Yep.
else.
right, and to give you some really rough numbers, because I'm trying to do math in my head, but it'd be just under 30,000 a year in sewer rates, sewer fees. The connection fee we're looking to spread that over 20 years, would be about 7,400 a year. And then the bond payment portion, and this is for the entire bonded amount, which I used 90% of the project cost, the estimated project cost, for a 30-year bond is about 147,000 a year.
I was a member of the High School Renovation Commission committee. I'm sorry that Mike Flaherty isn't here. He was on that with me. And the whole time we were dealing with that high school renovation thing, we were dealing with sewage. We were dealing with all of the problems at both the high school and the Yale. And the system that we put in there was designed very purposely to go up to the middle school. We knew then that if we put both those schools in the middle school, we were told the middle school had to have more stuff coming in, that they had too little. But if we put both those schools in, then the Housing Authority, which also back then had a problem, would not be able to tie in up at the middle school. But the long-range plan that we were sold on was that we would build this thing and use the pipes and put it so that it could be reversed at some point when we could make the connection with Wheaton and put the high school and the Yale school tied in with Wheaton. That would allow the Norton Housing Authority to move upstream and go into the middle school, and that they could handle that, and in fact, it would be good for the sewage plant at the middle school to have that. That still seems to me a much more sensible thing and probably less costly than what you're proposing. Suddenly, we're being told, it sounds like, and maybe I'm hearing this wrong, that the middle school sewage plant isn't going to work well at all, and so this middle school has to connect all the way down in as well. The reverse was what we were sold back then, is that we could get the Norton Housing Authority up to and improve the middle school, have that work, and then put the high school and the Yale school going down and into the Wheaton tie-in. Why is that not still the most feasible plan?
One of the things that's a problem with the operation of the middle school plant, and the reason they have not met permit for quite a while, is nitrogen. And they're unable to denitrify, namely take the nitrogen out. Part of the issue that's happening today is that one of the things that was done when the actual tie-in was made from the high school and the Yale school to that force main is all the two septic tanks were left in place. So solids are being left in place, organics are being left in place. There's really just ammonia going down, which is, like I said, making it more difficult for the plant to do what it's supposed to do. So when that tie-in was made, both large septic tanks, one for the high school, one for the Yale school, were left in place, and they pump out of those tanks into that 4-inch line.
So in other words, the middle school treatment plant is still starved, and it's also being fed ammonia.
So we're not sending everything up from the high school and the Yale school?
No, and from what we've been able to gather is that those septic tanks were left in place as a pre-settling mechanism so that there wouldn't be accumulation of solids in the 4-inch line going to the middle school, which sounded like a fine idea, but the consequences, it actually exacerbated the problems that the middle school is having. So what the school is thinking right now, and I don't want to speak for them, but they're thinking that if they can remove that flow from the middle school treatment plant, that treatment plant will operate acceptably
For the school alone?
for the middle school alone.
Not,
And-
yeah, okay.
Okay, and by removing the contribution from the other two schools.
Yes,
Okay. The business
they
about
met,
the 2 tanks, I somehow missed my ken when I was on that committee, because
Yeah.
I was under the impression, I think the other members of the committee, the renovation committee, was that everything was going to be pumped up.
in fact, some of the people in the school department thought that was actually happening until we showed them the plans, and they went out there and looked and said, you're right, we still have to pump those tanks, we still have to pay to pump out the septic tanks that are there.
It has to be our big tunnel.
Can this project benefit down the road, future and commercial
Yes.
property? So
Absolutely.
I noticed that the piping has gone from 6 inches at Freeman up to 12.
Let me explain what that is, actually. What we've got here is the proposal, and if you can hear me, from the pump station, it's a 6-inch force main. This is going to be located to pick up, obviously, flows coming down here, as well as the Housing Authority. And it's going to flow through a 6-inch force main, a pressure main, to the high point. This now is a gravity line, a 12-inch gravity line, all the way down to Wheaton, okay? Now, like I said, and this line is going to be an 8-inch line, big enough for all the flows from here down, as well as under one thing I failed to point out is that this area of the town was scheduled to be the first area of the town to be sewered down the road, after the Wheaton pump station, the town center pump station and force main. This was always scheduled to be first. I think with regard to the Housing Authority approaching the board or the commission, that's the reason this has jumped ahead. I think much faster than even the commission would have ever dreamed, because of the added funding that could and should be coming in from the Housing Authority. If that explains the sizing issue?
Yeah.
So this is going to be a 12-inch main all the way down, and this is an 8-inch lane flowing backwards to the pump station.
And what about residential tie-ins?
Absolutely. Everybody. This is designed to pick up everybody along the way.
Right, because it's so close to the state highway, or perhaps in the state highway, we don't want to do it twice, so the line, the collection system is going to be sized for the anticipated build-out in the region, and that's our comprehensive waste management plan. We look ahead for.
So we can use the existing pipe system from the middle school down to the Housing Authority.
Let me add one thing. One of the things that we're showing here, and that it may come to pass, maybe not, down the road. In dealing with the staff at the school department, they like the idea of a phased approach, where they pick up the high school and Yale School first, get that flow out, get the treatment plant operating, and by the way, it was meeting permit all the time. Before those flows from the Yale School and high school are added. So that's a key factor here, that DEP regulates this, and if you don't meet permit, you get a notice of noncompliance, and that's kind of where the situation stands right now. So here's a little thing that what I didn't clarify, is that there is a way, relatively inexpensively, to pick up the middle school and bring that this way, if in fact the town wants to get out of the business. Okay? That may or may not be the pass. I don't want to put words in the mouth of the school department. But that 4-inch line that's there could in fact be used for just that. You put a pump station at the middle school, and you're pumping up, and you get to the high point, and they're in. So that entire 4-inch line could be used in, like you said, Paul, in reverse to come into the town center.
Steve?
So,
I have a couple of questions on just one overall. In the future or going forward, if a plan is set, how does that plan get approved to change? Like I heard Paul say that the decision was made, the plan was going to get, and I thought I heard you guys say that plan for the high school and that change was changed after the fact. How does that work?
Right, well, this was out of our involvement at all. It's just that when we were doing the research on what was going on at those two school properties, it's kind of a labyrinth of piping there, and there were decisions made, again, by others at the time that made sense within the context of of construction, or they found a difficulty here, or were planning ahead for something there, and it turns out that I think there's two pump locations, and they pump back and forth, and how it changes from initial design to final design is impossible to ask us. You would need somebody who's actually
Okay.
involved in those decisions.
So we're looking at this plan right now. We're making certain assumptions
Yes.
on the flow. How do we know, one, those assumptions won't change somewhere down the road, that everything gets changed, just like we're talking about today?
Sure.
And then the assumptions that we're going to base this project on, if they're no longer valid.
Okay, so it's a two-part process. The first thing that we do, and this is a requirement from the state, is to do a comprehensive wastewater management plan. It is a document about this thick that is basically a study of anticipated growth in land use. It's similar to a master plan for the town, or it's usually done in conjunction or informed by a master plan for the town, which Norton is a little different, doesn't have that. But we look ahead 20 years, population growth, land use, what we anticipate the needs are going to be for sewer service for the next 20 years. And then there are a series of public hearings, and it goes, to Massachusetts for review and additional input, and it's finally published. So that is what we use as the basis for our long-term planning. And then for this particular project, there is a design phase. There's a detailed design phase. Right now, we have gotten input from the schools on their needs and their enrollment, the housing authority on their sewer needs, and some background information on their costs. We have information, or Weston and Sampson has information on past projects, similar projects. In order to put together a project estimate, plus a contingency is included in the dollar amount that we're looking for. So that's our starting point. Then we go into probably an 18-month design phase, where the details of the project are looked at rigorously, and any changes that need to be made would be made at the end of that design phase. And if there was a change in anything substantive, the cost of the project, the size of the project, whatever, we would have to come back to town meeting and explain that, and say, and obviously request a change in the scope in order to do this. So it's very formal. It's a very formal engineering process. And then once it's built, you have to live with it. And the life of a wastewater system is about 50 years. So even though our comprehensive plan looks ahead 20, we, the commission, we actually look ahead 50 years to make sure that we are not making any short-sighted decisions that would require us to rebuild infrastructure, especially when it's on a state road, when it's very expensive to do that.
And then, did I understand right now that the middle school treatment plant is non-compliant?
Correct.
So that's happening. So now, to bring that to compliance, what would the cost be?
We're aware of some of the short-term requirements that the school department is going to have to do to potentially hire somebody to evaluate what those needs are, to bring it back into compliance. The thinking is that, in fact, there was a major meeting about a month ago where 4 people from DEP, school department, housing authority, Representative Barrows, Mike Burney, the Water and Sewer Board, and
Representative Howard.
and Howard, Steve Howard was there as well, to put this game plan together, because there were so many issues converging at the same time.
So now, is that non-compliance fee-based as well, or is it just a notification?
There is a cost associated with bringing it into compliance, and that's one of the things that motivated the meeting. Now, again, the school treatment system is currently outside of the control or responsibility of the water and sewer department for the town. So, again, I want to be careful, to make that distinction as I'm talking about it. But the meeting we had with the DEP and the school and the housing authority and so forth was to take a look at this from a big picture level. To put in place a long-term plan is more desirable from DEP standpoint. They don't want the school to be spending, throwing good money after bad or whatever, but to be incurring additional costs to comply with an order from DEP to change operations at their wastewater treatment plant if, in a span of 2 or 3 or 5 years, a permanent infrastructure type solution, such as bringing the schools into the public wastewater treatment system, could be done. And so DEP has offered to work with the schools to give them additional time or forgive some of the, or a stay of some of the orders of compliance that they were directed to do, because they would rather see the funding associated with managing those costs be contributed to coming into a long-term solution.
Okay, before.
I know you're hearing
Yeah,
at 7:30.
Okay.
so, I mean, we have to break for a public hearing, then we can obviously continue if you,
You can stick around if we need to.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
right, it's now 7:30, and how do we do this procedurally?
I'm going to make the motion to.
Make a motion to go into the public hearing. Make a motion that we move into the public hearing.
Second?
This motion is second. All those in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. Okay, this is now 7:30. This is the public hearing for the fiscal 2018 town budget. Budget that has been recommended at this time by the Finance Committee is it's a balanced budget, and it represents level services, or as close to as possible. Total budget is $53,760,398, is a 3% increase over fiscal year 2017. General government budget is $11,955,769, which is an increase of 3%. Schools, $27,105,655, which is an increase of 4%. And also the library of $399,111, which is also an increase of 3%. Now, as I said, this represents level services, and in some cases, in order to meet the budget restrictions, the schools actually came in at $70,421 less than what they would have needed to have exact level services, and the town came in $130,532 less than what would be required for level services. And on the town side, that represents for the public safety a reduction of $29,000 in police overtime, $25,000 in fire overtime, $48,944 in fire salary and wages, and $12,500 in ambulance expense. So, at this time, is any questions regarding the budget?
Mr. Chairman, just wanted to let people know there are budgets, extra budgets there if anyone needs one.
Okay. I think everyone is aware that there's an election on Tuesday, and it's to vote whether or not to basically put a new budget onto the town meeting. The process, as I think everyone is familiar with right now, is the town meeting. There's a vote for the override, and if it passes, then that will then move to the town meeting, where it will be the final vote whether or not to approve the override budget. And at the town meeting, the Finance Committee will recommend one budget, and as it's really not possible for us to comment on the override budget because it is not a balanced budget, then we have not taken a position on the override as of yet. But in the event that it does pass the town election, then we will, I would imagine, reopen the article and have discussions on reconsidering the budget. So I think we're all, no further questions? Any comments from the Finance Committee? Well, at this time, I would like to thank the town manager and all the department heads, the school committees, school superintendent. It's a lot of work, and in this case, it's a lot harder to cut than it is to add, and that's unfortunately what we found ourselves doing this year. So I appreciate everyone's help in this whole process, and we will, at this point, I guess, say no further discussion. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Kimball.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, we'd like to thank the Finance Committee for all the hard work they've done also. I think this process every year gets to be tougher and tougher, and you mentioned deficits again this year, and it's an ongoing situation. It has been for quite a long time. If anyone wants to know how the town actually works and how the budget process works, this is the forum you should attend. This is where you get your answers. Every single micro part of this budget is discussed by this committee, Finance Committee, and looked at and analyzed. And no matter how you want to decide on the override or lack of, or if it's a need for it, whatever reason you might have, this committee has always been very, very good. And I sat on it myself for 4 years, way back in the doc days, before we had a professional manager and everything that went with that, where we had to really analyze and tear these things apart and figure out how they work. Fortunately, we have a very strong manager now that can do a very good job of presenting it to us. We have department heads that are a lot more professional, in my opinion, than they used to be, and they understand the daily concept and the issues that that we have every single day. So, but I didn't want to go step aside and not recognize the effort and the time that the Finance Committee puts into this also. Town manager does a great job.
Thank you.
Department heads, superintendent does a great job, but you guys, by far, are the ones that really lead the pack and make this happen, so thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. So do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Opposed? It was unanimous. And now we will resume with the regular Finance Committee meeting. Could we, representatives come back up to the podium, and then we can, there's still some additional questions the committee has.
Sorry, I guess I just have a couple more for you. And if we lay out, so right now, ongoing, operating expense right now, and maybe you don't have an idea of this, if I was to lay out how much the Housing Authority is currently paying for this operation, the schools are currently paying for this operation, I guess that would really be the town side that gets impacted by this.
So round numbers are about, each is paying about $100,000 a year.
So if I was to look at that, just say $200,000
Yes.
for everything.
Every year, yes.
And then ongoing with the hookups, the ongoing operational expenses in the future, how much would they be paying?
Okay, so I projected this out, and again, we're making some assumptions at this point, right? But it's coming out to about $190,000 a year if the project is bonded over 30 years. And that is after an initial payment of $332,000, which is 10% of the $3.32 million that we estimate the project cost to be.
How many years did you say?
I brought the bond out 30 years. You can do that now. So it helped with the cash flow. The interest rate's a little bit higher.
That means the project cost will probably be somewhere around $9 million.
No. I actually did the overall project cost, the cumulative amount of the bond payment over 30 years. It's a $2.988 million SRF bond, okay? And it comes out to $4.4 million over the 40 years, and that's
30 years?
over 30 years, yeah. Yeah, it's because the rate is relatively low.
Maybe we have a banker at the end of the table. That doesn't sound logical to me. Okay.
I can, I use 2.75 plus 0.4% on top of that for the administrative fees for the bond. It's about a 20, if I remember right, it's about a 28% premium over the life of the loan, whereas it's about 21% on a 20-year.
Can I add one thing? Couple other things that are yet to be put in play here is that we've also started talking to folks about, like Diane said, the 2% loan is pretty much likely to happen. The SRF funds are still only 2%. You did get a 2% loan for the work was done previously at Wheaton and tying in the North School. One other thing they're looking to do in August, and early applications need to go in for the SRF program in August, as well as a Mass Works infrastructure grant. So what we're looking to do is to also get some outright grant monies from the Mass Works program, and that application process starts in August as well. So there is, in fact, an opportunity to get more state money to come to the town to improve the infrastructure, thereby decreasing the cost to the community.
So if we look at, like, I guess, the costs seem to be fluctuating from these conversations right now. We're not 100% sure as the overall cost of this project. Is that my understanding? Or this is firm right now?
The only thing that changed from earlier today to tonight is the issue of that pump station on Housing Authority property. Originally, we had not included it because it's not in a public way, but it really would be a public pump station, not a Housing Authority station.
Okay.
So that's the only thing that was added, was
All right,
that
so-
pump station.
and then
That's the
the-
only variable.
And then the urgency to get it onto this town meeting.
Is the, in addition to the deadlines for funding that Fran just talked about, because we'll lose a year, even if we did this in the fall, we would lose a year, but there's also the pressure on the schools to do something about their permit issues.
Okay.
Yeah, and the other issue, and if I might interrupt, is the whole issue of, is just timing. We're not quite sure of the 1.1 million. We don't know enough about that grant to be able to say whether it's going to be held for the Housing Authority and the town of Norton versus being put back in the till and given it to somebody else. We are not aware of that. I'm not saying it's likely to be lost,
Right.
but we don't know. We just don't know.
Okay. So right now, we're looking at 2.9 in the article.
No, 3 point something.
2
Right, we'd like to change the article to 3.32.
So that's my question. Okay.
Yes.
So the 3.3 based on
based on
tight
including
conversations
the,
today.
yes,
So this is going to change the article to 3.3 million.
that's correct.
Okay. And then my last one, again, when this is all said and done, what would the capacity be on this whole system now? When everything's hooked in,
What is
what
the
extra
12-inch line
capacity?
carry?
Well, it's going to, if I had all my notes here, I could actually go through it. Let's maybe look at it a little different way. Let's look at what you own for capacity in the MFN plant, okay? You owned originally about 500,000 gallons a day. Added to that, 165,000 gallons a day that's being added because
And we
of
got the
the
Campanelli
expansion of the
plant.
treatment plant. In addition to that, there's another 70,000 that was added with the arrangement between Campanelli and Trading Back Flow. So if we could do the numbers in our head, it's about 730,000
Yeah, something like
gallons a
that.
day.
And then if you add in some of these businesses and such on main, what does that do to that 700?
Not even close.
Doesn't make a dent,
Doesn't do anything?
doesn't make a dent.
Okay.
I mean, it does, it does.
It does help,
It
obviously.
does help, but it's,
In
we
fact-
have plenty of capacity.
One of the things that you also, that is a little nuance of how you're billed by the MFN plant is your fixed costs. You pay certain fixed costs for that plant based on how much capacity you own versus what you use. So obviously, if you're a current user, you want to see more users because they're that help pick up the cost of the fixed costs at the MFN plant. And if you have any questions about that, here are your two representatives that can probably speak to it better than I.
Okay, Paul?
When this is done, high school, Yale School, are they just going to be pumping ammonia down the other way, or are they going to pump everything?
No, not going to, hopefully not going to pump anything, Paul. Hopefully we'll go, those
Well,
pump stations.
all right, but
They're going to be by gravity, and those septic tanks are gone.
the
They're pumped-
septic tanks.
Everything's going into the sewer
Septic tanks
system.
are gone, okay. So that's one gain. Didn't know they were there, but the thing that bothers me here is the middle school plant and what it needs or doesn't need. It doesn't seem very clear to me that anybody really seems to know what it needs. And I keep thinking that if we, say, put the high school and Yale School going out toward Wheaton and had the Housing Authority go up to the middle school with not just ammonia, but with everything, as was originally the long-term plan, it seems to me that makes more sense than this does. Now, that's just, first time I've had a chance to really look at it is tonight, so I need to think about it some more.
Sure. And if I could help, there is a problem putting the housing authority flow into the middle school treatment plant. It's a administrative issue, a state issue. They can't. And the superintendent pointed that out, that it just cannot be done. The specifics of the issue, I don't know if you remember.
No.
But it can't be, no matter how desirable it is, it just, there's a regulatory or some administrative issue that makes it virtually impossible.
I'd like to know a little
to
bit
do.
more about it, because
Yeah.
we were never told about this when we went through this whole high school.
Mike?
Just
There's-
on that issue, the schools did apply to DEP, and DEP denied it. They said that the middle school could not handle the flow, and they wouldn't allow the housing authority to tie into that.
Well, I knew that they couldn't handle the flow if the others went in, but that was the reason we were given, was that they couldn't tie in because the middle school couldn't handle both the Yale School and the high school and the housing authority.
As far as
We
I
never heard
know.
about this other
There's
thing
another,
that you're
there's
talking
another
about at
issue.
all.
There's another issue, and again.
The one of the things, Paul, that, and I've anecdotally, just by being around, you kind of hear things, what the decisions were and what the plans were. My understanding, and it makes some sense, that force main, that 4-inch line that goes inside the 12-inch water main that was abandoned, extends all the way to the Salmon East School. So the original plan was to take the Salmon East School, the high school, the Yale School, and bring all of those schools to the middle school plant. There was a mention, I believe, early on of bringing in the housing authority, and that was discounted in the original reports. That's my understanding.
You mentioned something which makes a lot of sense, and that's there's a grant out there, we may get it, maybe we won't get it. If we don't get it, does that mean that 1.1 million is now 3.3 is 4.4?
No,
No.
no. The
What is
grant
that
money
grant
was
gonna
not
be good for?
assumed, was not assumed.
It's not a $4 million project, it's a $3.3 million
So it's
project.
with the grant.
To be reduced
So
by,
why are we going out to borrow 3.3 when we're going to have 1.1? They have already got it in hand. It's cash in hand.
that's a good question. So
I
maybe
mean,
that
but-
can be issued.
But I know what
It's
the
a very
question,
good question.
I know what the answer really is we don't know whether they have it in hand. That's why we don't use the 1.1 million, because you just said, well, the grant may disappear.
We don't know.
That's
That
right.
we don't know.
You know, this could
But-
turn into another weed whacker, all right, where we buy something where everybody's going to want it, and then when we get it, nobody wants it. or the grant didn't come in. Oh, by the way, we can't do it. How much money did we spend trying to put a road down 495 to get the desalinization plant going? And all of a sudden, oh, but that didn't happen. We thought it was going to happen, but the state said we couldn't do it. I'm always concerned when there's something that's out there that's not tied down. That's like me selling you a car, but I don't have the title, okay? But you're going to give me the money anyway, because you know I'm a good guy. So, but that's, that's my concern. Whenever I hear, and you made the statement, whenever I hear something that it's not firm, it's not signed on the dotted line, the state could change their mind tomorrow.
The dollar amount is firm, the $1.1 million. What I said was, I'm not sure how long the Housing Authority can hold that grant, or how long the money would be held by the state or federal agency that's giving the money. That's the issue.
They could give it to somebody else, even if we approved it. They could give it to somebody next year.
And the other question we had was that I'm always concerned that if this money has been put in their budget or given to them to build a treatment plant, who's to say you can use it to extend a sewer?
You're exactly right.
And we've asked that question, the answer was given in the affirmative, yes, it's transferable to be used for sewer.
Mr. Chairman? My question is, does it matter if the Housing Authority has a $1.1 million grant? Aren't we looking at this, that it's a $3.32 million project?
Yes.
And then how it gets paid for is something else. And if you're saying that they're going to give you 1.12 million, however they get it, that should be their cost. So either they get it through a grant, or the Housing Authority is going to pay that to you somehow, like everybody else, any other user does. It's going to be based on what their gallons are. So that's why you have to authorize the full borrowing, because it's for the cost of the project, and then how it gets paid for is it's going to be from users.
I agree, but shouldn't there be something in here that relates to that? That we're gonna be able to get the $1.1 million from them somehow?
Well,
Will we hold them in, we take them?
it wouldn't be in an article. It would be just like any other project that the Water or Sewer Department does. It says, and I'm sure it's in that article if you read through the whole thing, that it's going to be paid by users because it's an enterprise account.
Other public or private funds,
Right.
federal grants, I mean, it lists everything.
And when we do the motion, we would make that clear, that in the motion, that it's going to be paid out of the sewer enterprise account. And however they get that money.
So that means it's gonna be the sewer rates. The people who are paying for sewer now are gonna get tagged with this? Well, if it's gonna
No.
be paid out of sewer enterprise account,
Right.
where's it?
Well, there'll be the tie-in fee to the Housing Authority,
Correct.
whatever that is.
But I mean, the total 3.3 million.
Right, you've got contributions coming from all the folks along the way. You've got the Housing Authority contribution, you've got the school's contribution, and like I said, hopefully there'll be some grant contribution as well.
Schools contribution is still our money, tax money.
That,
As the town manager just pointed out, there's two parts to this. One is the estimate for the project, which is the $3.32 million. And the second is how is it going to be paid for? What I've done is put together a plan for paying for this that is not going to overburden the current ratepayers, the new ratepayers, or the taxpayers, because by financing the project over 30 years, financing the connection fee over 20 years, and the rate payments themselves help to keep that cost of bringing in the schools and the housing authority within what the schools and the housing authority are currently paying to deal with their waste. And so there should be a net zero to the average resident in town, which is our goal. This is what we try to do with these big projects, is to find a way to fund them so that we're not being killed by cost. There is an upfront cost because again, the intricacies of getting things funded, the design kind of has to be paid for by itself, and it has to be upfront, and that's about 10% of the project. This is where we're counting on a good chunk of the money that the Housing Authority has available to subsidize that upfront cost. And more if, again, how it's actually going to be structured is tough, but because, again, we're rushing to do this so that we can meet our grant deadlines and our funding deadlines. And this is something else, too. The Housing Authority has about $1 million, $1.1 million. What Fran has also mentioned is there is an additional grant available from the state that we have a good shot at getting. So that's a second source, plus the SRF financing, which we can get over 30 years, which again is a very favorable bond rate. So we have to put together that funding picture, which is why the warrant article is put together, raise or appropriate by, any other means, and the other language that's in there is how do we put together a financing plan? But our goal in doing this is to keep the sewer rates where they are and to not add a burden to the taxpayers that the schools are going to have to pay more or the state is going to have to pay for the Housing Authority one way or the other. And so we know that they're going to get funded to pay for whatever waste treatment system they have to use, but the state's looking at this and saying long-term, we'd rather them tie into a permanent infrastructure rather than pump out their failing septic systems. What are they doing, twice a week or something awful? It's very frequent.
So I actually have just a question on, ultimately, if this was accomplished, is the middle school no longer have a waste treatment plant? They just put this pumping station and then it goes, no? Will they stay?
That could be the long-term plan. That is not the plan we're talking about here.
So what is the purple pump station in the middle school for?
Down the road, potentially down the road, if in fact the school department wants to get out of the treatment business.
So that's not part of the 3.3
It is
million?
not. It ends,
Okay.
as I said, it ends here. It ends here. That's it. There's the.
So this project is the square box? So, okay,
And then all
so,
the way down
Right.
to.
so let me ask the next question. So, ultimately, the Housing Authority is putting to a pump station, it's taking a right-hand turn, that's gonna gravity fed over to Wheaton. And then ultimately, and at the end of this project, after 3.3 million, is the Yale School and high school now either hanging a left down the pump station or hanging a right down to Wheaton, either one, I don't care which one it is. Is that
It's
the
gonna
case?
hang it right to.
It'll hang right to Wheaton. And now that 4-inch red main is no longer used.
Except that down the road, there's a potential if, in fact, the
But
middle
this,
school.
after this
They
project,
could use it.
it's not in use.
That, it's, yeah, because it's currently.
Not
being
going
used-
that way.
Because the high school and the Yale School currently use it.
Right, so after 3.3 million, Housing Authority, pump, take a right, yellow, whatever, take a right, and we're done. That's the simple of it. That's
you
what's
go.
gonna happen at the end.
Right.
And ultimately, by having the high school and Yale School not go to the middle school, that middle school can actually supposedly function in and of itself as its own entity.
Yeah,
I'm clear,
Okay.
I think.
you did a good job.
The financing plan that you're talking about now, is that something that can be shared with this committee?
I'd rather not. I put it together. I got these numbers just this afternoon, and I'd be willing to share it. I would like to proofread it first and clean it up a little bit before I made it for consumption. But of course,
Fillmore Drive is a private way. Have you talked to Wheaton about this at all?
yes.
And they're okay with it?
In fact, Paul, the original appropriation was made for the town center pump station. The authorization was made to acquire an easement along the entire length of Fillmore, all the way to Taunton Street.
Right.
It's already been thought of.
Utility easement.
Good, thank you.
It's
Just
yeah.
thought I'd ask.
The high school and the Yale school that currently has the existing tanks,
But we got it the whole way, I see.
did any of you look at just fixing the ammonia issue with those tanks as a alternate scenario and then pumping better waste, if you will, down to the middle school, and then that's solving the middle school issue and taking the housing authority out of the equation? As just a
Do you
comparison?
want to take it?
That's a possibility. We did not look at that. Mainly, again, the starting point was the housing authority. The reason, I think Diane said earlier, that this was done was the bigger concern at the time was the fact that they've got a 4-inch force main. And the worry is if you've got solids going down the pipe and the lack of velocity and how length of time it would take to get from the high school, Yale School, to get to the middle school, they're concerned about solids settling out and impacting the flow through that force main. So the thought was at the time, I'm putting how the engineer probably thought when they did this, is to get the solids out so they don't worry about anything settling out and affecting the flow through the force main. So we'd have to reverse that thought, I guess.
But I mean, it's safe to assume that if we were to just fix the issue, try to just fix the issue at the middle school by removing the tanks and just going straight through the 4-inch force main, that is an option?
It's not a good option for a few reasons. As Fran alluded to, the low flow and the long distance causes the wastewater to become septic during its trip, which is a bad thing for the wastewater treatment plant, which is one reason why the engineer at the time decided to, we suspect, to remove the solids. So it wouldn't work well anyway. And then the issue that makes me very uncomfortable is that 4-inch line and the 12-inch sleeve. If you have a leak anywhere along that 4-inch line, you would never be able to find out where it is because it would fill the annular space between the 4-inch and the 12-inch. It's a pipe within a pipe, right?
That problem is gonna exist regardless, right?
Well, if you continue to use the pipe, yes. We have talked about the school bringing the middle school pumping through, yes, right. It could. But from a long-term, we're trying to put in a proper solution because we already have a Band-Aid is in place today. So what we're proposing is a long-term, a permanent solution that would keep, public health and so forth where it ought to be, and maintainable as well.
One more question. Sorry, I think it's my last one. The work done on West Main Street, the 8-inch, the 6-inch, that's on the state highway? Is the 3.3 million included in the extra cost of doing it
Yes.
on the state highway?
Yes.
Talked about that, so that's it.
And if I could add, though, as far as tying in the middle school, if we can stay out of the state highway paving portion, the paved portion of the state highway, it would reduce the overall cost of the project substantially, and to the tune of about $1 million, right? So if we could find the grant financing, and if we can stay out, and these are all ifs, right? This is part of the design process that we have to go through. Then it could become feasible to bring the middle school in sooner rather than later if we have a little bit of luck with some additional financing, and we can have a little bit of luck and stay out of the paved portion of the state roadway.
And as you might guess, the utilities that are there now all stayed out of the pavement, so they could avoid these costs.
Right, there are gas lines and electric and so forth in that area.
Mr. Kimball?
Makes sense.
So I know Mike Eunice wasn't available at one of the capital improvement meetings that we had regarding the $130,000 that was asked for in the appropriation because of the middle school sewer problem. And the issue was brought up that we had to put, they asked for $130,000, I think we gave them 30 or 32. $32,000. $32,000, just earmark that money for a purpose of an engineering or study or whatever they had to do on the property. It was my impression, though, based on the information we were given, that the middle school really doesn't want to be in the sewer business either. And it was my impression that they would want to connect to the system at some point. Now, we all know that the middle school was designed and built to handle that particular facility, so it can handle it, right? I mean, it can handle that one building, that's not a problem. It's when we started pumping everything back the other way, it became a problem. So, my gut feeling is the school committee and the school department probably will use that facility for a period of time, but to answer some of your concerns, at some point, we're gonna be talking about connecting this to that pumping station in front of the senior housing and making that all happen. Again, my impression was that this was just, we're putting a Band-Aid on it until we can figure out what to do with it. So we should look at that as probably as part of the project. I think getting back to what Tom was trying to allude to earlier is we all understand that the senior housing is a state-owned facility. Okay, they have deeper pockets than we do. So if we're using 10,000 gallons a day, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Let's say we're using 10,000 gallons a day and they're using 5,000 of it, then how much of it should they be paying for? And I think that's kind of what I've been hearing going around the room, and that would be my question. How much is the state going to pay to help us build this facility? I totally agree that we need to run this thing down Main Street. I mean, it's very important that we do that. But at the same time, I'm surprised Ralph is not here jumping up and down. Everybody that owns a house along that stretch of road is going to have to pay for that to go in front of their house, and they're going to have to pay for it. Yep. And there's going to be connection fees, and there's going to be flow fees, and there's going to be everything that goes with it. And knowing some of the people live along that stretch of West Main Street, they're not going to be very happy about that. So that's something else we have to keep in mind. So I think above and beyond, though, it is a very important project, and I think it's necessary. But I just want to make sure we have all the numbers together and all the right stuff together before we make this decision, because I think it's very important for us to start sewering as much of the town as we possibly can. And this is a step in the right direction, heading it down toward center of town, what we call the center of town. We call it the common area of town. And then you can branch off, go left to Mansfield Ave, right to Taunton Avenue, and have that future expansion. But one way or the other, we're all going to pay for it. And Diane's right. It's not the present users that's going to probably have to pay for it. It's going to people are going to have to connect to it. They're going to end up having to pay for this project. So.
Well, you led into the question I was going to ask, because I'm thinking about the construction and everything going through the center of town. And you're going to do pavement and everything else is going to be right at that intersection. Originally, I'm going back to the past, the idea was that eventually the connection would come in through the L School property and come over through town-owned property, much of it being town-owned property, or Wheaton-owned property, if we could get them to agree, and connect here, which would avoid having all of that major construction going through. I could just picture 140 and 123 while this is going on, and I think it's going to be expensive as heck to do this. And maybe going down there Main Street is good. I understand what Mr. Kimball is saying about connecting to Mansfield Avenue. But I still think there at least should be some sort of real cost analysis of what it's going to cost to put that thing down Main Street and then down Taunton Avenue and through that intersection, not just in money, but in terms of all sorts of things, as opposed to coming the back way and having a fairly short distance on Taunton Avenue only before we cut in.
Right.
Just another alternative, that's all.
It was an alternative that we had actually asked Weston and Sampson to take a look at. And for various reasons, it's not a good plan, mostly because the school department doesn't want that easement going through, cross-country as well. Fran, do you know a rough idea, how many feet per day would we be able to lay the pipe? I'm sorry, I'm putting him on the spot. But to get an idea of how long the disruption would be in place for, right?
On a state highway.
We're actually pretty shallow. As you might know, the Wheaton Pump Station is actually pretty low and comes up actually pretty quickly to get up to Taunton. And by, as far as grade wise, and you're looking to pick up all the buildings for basement service, assuming they need it, okay? So you're talking about a trench about 8.5 feet deep. So I don't know what the borings show. I don't know if we have ledge there yet. That's all part of the preliminary work that needs to be done. I don't think there's ledge. There is ledge further down. We hit it, obviously,
It slopes
on Fillmore, on the other side towards Pine Street. But a typical rate for something like this is probably 100 feet a day. A traffic control plan would be required because we're in a state highway. So we'd have to maintain traffic at least one way at all times. And then you'd probably look at scheduling, and I'm always scared to say this, you might even be talking about night work, just because of the traffic. That intersection is a tough one to get through.
We don't want trench work at night either, so.
It's done, it's not done often.
So maybe it's my last question, maybe not.
Yeah, we gotta move along here.
Someone's connection fees if they're going across a state highway, because if you have a gravity fed, people on this side aren't going across the street, but the other people on the other side of the street are going across. Are their connection fees greater because they have to go across the state highway, or is there one fixed fee to go across?
So what this provides for is extend the service connection to the property line, whether you're on one side of the street or the other. So the town would extend service to your property line, whether you're on the left-hand side or the right-hand side. So it doesn't matter, it's immaterial.
Okay, last question.
Well, I was just gonna say, just what Paul brought up, brought me a question in my mind, timeline. I know with utilities, wasn't West Main paved about 3 years ago?
They're getting
No.
rid of it.
Was it
No,
4
it's
years
been a
ago?
while.
It's closer to 10,
Closer to 10.
Was it really?
We're outside of the,
yeah.
Okay.
we're in that window where, yeah, we're outside of the
Because I know-
moratorium,
I know-
and
I know there's
Closer
a
to 10.
timeline where utilities, they're not allowed to excavate on a paved road for a certain amount of time.
right.
Right.
We're outside of that, and I think we can get it done before they do any repaving.
It better not be.
All right, I think there's been enough discussion. Now, if you could, when you're comfortable with your plan, somehow get that to the committee.
Could you, I need an email address, or can I get it from Mr. Units, or,
Well, you could probably just send it to Mike and.
okay,
forward it.
all right, sure. Okay,
Well, thank you very much.
okay, thank
A
you.
lot of information.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I know we discussed this at the last meeting. I told you I'd get an estimate, which I did get a day or two after our last meeting. If we have a large town meeting and we need to have all the rooms at the high school, the gym, the auditorium, and the cafeteria, the cost for the equipment that we'll need in order to televise that meeting is $29,357.25, and that's based on 2 nights. If it's only one night, it'd be $3,600 less, because we wouldn't need the staff people for the second night. So say it is 2 nights, and it's $29,357. Cable has agreed that they'll pay a third of that cost. So the cost would be $19,571.50.
That's doable.
Just to give you an idea on that. And we're still looking to see how many chairs we would have to actually rent, trying to see what the cost of rental of chairs would be also. But that'll be the largest cost there, I'm sure.
So the chairs would be more in addition to the
Yes.
19 plus
Yeah.
something you said?
Just to keep in mind with your reserve fund,
Mike,
because we would need that.
So when you said cable's gonna pay a third, is that like,
Yeah.
my lovely cable company
What's
paying a
that?
third, or is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, Norton Media Access.
Oh, not media access, okay.
Now, is there any estimate on what, like, extra police coverage and things like that might cost?
We'll use our emergency management people to be out in the parking lots.
Okay.
Yeah. Cross that bridge if we get there.
And you also asked the schools to prepare a transfer request. And they have prepared a request for the technology improvements that they said they needed, $43,182.20. And if you look at the present balance on the account, it's $2.5 million. That's why I was saying I don't understand why we have to do this now, but if they need this money at the end of June for some reason, they can't survive with the 2.5 million, they could come back. But
Yeah,
I think 2.5 million is probably more expense than the rest of the town has all year.
If I'm not mistaken, our reserve fund was to be used as a stopgap, not a career path, right? It was to be used when balances came to us, you had a payment that you had to make, and the balance was zero in the account, and they needed money. When you're looking at, even if they spent it, they still would have $2.461 million left in that account. That's not a reserve fund transfer, as far as I'm concerned. It might not be everybody's opinion, but to me, that's not an emergency transfer.
Well, just on the reserve fund, the town budget itself is $12 million, say. And so the 150,000, I would always think is reserve fund for that 12 million. Now, if you have a $28 million budget, you should be able to plan in your budget a reserve to cover some of these costs. And
But if you had an account.
well, and also.
I always use the term, I remember Superintendent Martis one time saying, if I can't find $27,000 in a $27 million budget, there's something wrong.
And also, that amount of 43,000 was different than what we had even talked about at the last meeting. There was three components, and one of them was the anti-malware and anti-ransomware protection, that could have been put off. It's not, as a dire need as the email protection and, I said malware, but the anti-malware, and that was $15,000 to $16,000. So, I don't think we had planned, even at the last meeting, going for the full amount to begin with. But you take that, the portion out that isn't immediate, and that was $27,497. We're bringing it down to $16,000, which would make it even more manageable than than the $49,000.
Not only
So-
manageable, but that would make it even more ridiculous to give it to them
Well, I
out of a
think-
$2.5 million balance.
I think didn't they need a department number to designate it to as well?
Oh, they have one now.
Yeah, they
have
did
them.
that in their requests.
Yeah, it's their expense number.
Well, I would entertain a motion, but I think, at this stage of, where we're at, it's at the,
I make a motion. Put it to a
Well-
vote, Mike. That would-
I was persuaded at our meeting, wherever it was we had it at the media center, that the 13 and the 1922 were emergency requests for something that was not foreseen or planned. I was not persuaded that the 27,497 should be included at this point. I think that could wait, and either they can build it in, either they'll have excess in their budget by the end of the year or not. That the present balance in account is 2.504, but they've still got a long way in the school year to go. That's their total budget for salaries and everything else.
That's the expenses.
Based on that, I'm going to make the motion that we approve a transfer of, if I've added it right, $15,685.20 to fund the Fort Mail and the service security, which is sort of what I thought we had come to at the previous meeting, and I still think I would go along with that. So I move that figure.
Is it 15,9324?
No, but they changed the number to the
They changed their number.
2,100 to 1922.
Yeah, so it's 15,685.20, I believe.
Second?
I'll second.
All right. You know, I mean, I myself, you know, wasn't aware that, you know, I mean, proportionally, I mean, that, our reserves are much less than that at this stage of the game. And if they have as much of a school year left, then, you know, we have equally as much of our budget year left as well. So, I mean, it's, I don't know if this is, you know, we're talking, you know, $15,000. So, I don't really see the extraordinary and unforeseen qualification here.
This would bring their budget down to what? $2,490,000. I mean, we have to have some logic. Somewhere in this world, there has to be a logic. And when the balance in a budget is over $2 million, and they're looking for $15,000 from our $150,000 FinCom reserve, there's something illogical about it. Totally illogical. We could have unforeseen expenses where we need all of the rest of the $150,000. Okay? That's just my opinion.
We have an election.
Yeah.
I want to put out there, I'm more concerned, not if it's schools versus town, because I want to know when town is going to start looking town-wide at, no matter where it is, for protecting these kind of things, because it's going to start happening all over the place.
We have done that.
Okay.
We did that earlier this year.
Further discussion? All right, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion fails. All right, on to warrant articles.
You want to do, if you want to look at the special first,
Yes.
the articles remaining, Article 4 and 5. There'd be no action on either of those articles. That's the water budget supplements and sewer budget supplements.
I don't have I go from 1, 2, 7, 8.
7, 8. Don't have a,
10.
I think we're missing a page.
Oh, are you?
I'm missing 4, 5, and 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Okay.
The one you're talking about, actually.
Right here. Package?
Yeah, but they're talking
No,
about
it's
the
not
actual
in the
vote.
warrant.
The actual
Well,
The actual warrant, I'm sorry.
No.
well, on those, 4 and 5 are water budget supplements and sewer budget supplements, and there's going to be no, I recommend no action on those. There's no need.
So there's no.
On both of those?
Yes.
Entertain a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that Article 4, no action.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor? Taking no action. Opposed? Unanimous. Article 5.
Article 5, Mr. Chairman, I move take no action, Article 5.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor? Opposed? Unanimous.
And you're missing Article 6?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Article 3.
How about, okay. Next article, you should have Article 7,
Article 7,
I got Article.
okay.
All right.
I do too.
I don't have 6, though.
Article 6 you do not have, you said, right?
Yeah, 3 and 6. 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Is it here? Is it in?
Oh, it doesn't matter, all right.
Last meeting.
Okay.
Sarah's going to make copies of those. Article 7, this is a new provision, again, under the Municipal Modernization Act. This allows us, when we borrow, that any cost, when we go out to borrow, if there is proceeds from the sale of the bonds, we can use the proceeds from the sale of the bonds to help pay off the premiums. And we need to vote to accept this chapter, General Law, Chapter 44, Section 20, to allow us to do that.
So this is a no, just revising an existing one?
Yes.
Okay.
And that would allow us to reap that on all prior bonds.
Yes.
You have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we revise Article number 7, proceeds sales of the bonds.
To recommend.
You made me.
Recommend.
Okay. Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? One abstain. Oh.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, while Sarah's handing that out, the next article would be the one that you just talked about, so, for the design and construction of the public sewers on West Main Street, that's Article 8.
Yeah, I think we're gonna wait on that one.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
Article 9 and 10, once again, there's no need for any change to the capital plan or to put money into the capital plan, so I'd recommend no action on Articles 9 and 10.
Mr. Chairman, I move that Article 9 take no action.
Second.
Second motion, all those in favor? Opposed? Unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, Article 10, take no action.
Second.
Those motion is second, all those in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. So,
Sarah, I know we voted on number 7.
Yeah, what? Yeah, I was just gonna ask.
Number
there
7.
was one abstention on that vote.
Okay,
Number 7.
okay. Do you know who made the motion in the second?
Paul. Rick made the motion, Paul made the second.
Rick and Paul?
I made the motion, he seconded it.
Paul and Steve? Paul and Rick?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Article 6?
Article 6, this is to $75,000 to do the 5-year. The assessors do the 5-year recertification cycle, and this is a requirement of DOR that they do this. Used to be 3 years, but it's now 5 years.
No, it's 5, okay.
And I would recommend that we appropriate $75,500 from free cash.
Motion?
Yep, Mr. Chairman, I request to move to appropriate $75,500 for Article number 6
From free cash.
from free cash.
Second.
Motion is second, all those in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. So-
And on the annual town meeting,
I'm sorry, did we do 7?
Yeah.
yes,
Okay. All right, all right.
I'll just go through the articles that you haven't voted on yet. In Article 3, retirement expense, I still want to hold off on that. Article 4, collective bargaining agreements, still ongoing negotiations with some of the unions, and I'd like to hold off on that for now. 6 is the pilot tax agreement that it's still on hold. And then you did vote the budget, but if you want to vote the Article 8, to recommend the budget in the amount of $53,760,398.
Article 8.
Yeah. Have a motion on Article 8?
Mr. Chairman, I move we recommend Article 8 in the amount of $53,760,398.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Unanimous?
And the next two are the water enterprise and the sewer enterprise budgets. And the water enterprise budget,
It's 12 and 13.
yes.
I have written down recommended 2717 and 32717.
Yeah, I thought we had
The
done.
water was 3,330,26, and the sewer was 1,338,154.
Yeah, they're good.
We already approved it?
I thought we had done those, but, yeah.
Yeah. At least I have it written on my.
All right, so those have already been voted on.
You have that as already voted on, did you say, Tom?
Vote them again, if you want to do that, Mike, just to be sure, but I have, for some reason I have it written.
Just to make sure there's no,
That's right.
Yeah.
I'll move Article 12 in the amount of 3,330,026.
second. This motion is second. All those in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. Article 13,
Mr. Chairman, I recommend Article 13 in the amount of 1,338,154.
this motion is second. All those in favor? Opposed? Unanimous.
The only other article right now, the next article, Article 14, is capital improvements. Right now, I'd recommend no money being added into capital improvements. Now, that would have to change if the override did pass on the 25th, because as part of the override, there's $125,000 for improvements to the Chartley Station. So I'd recommend capital would have to meet again and come back with a recommendation to add money in for that.
We'll have to look at a lot of different things.
So, Mr. Chairman, I move no action on Article 14.
Second.
This motion is second. All those in favor? Opposed? Unanimous.
And the only other one right now that you haven't taken any action on is Article 19. I'm still waiting for something from Town Council on Article 19.
So we should be able to finish up next week. Okay.
When do you want to meet next week? Monday?
24th, I think we had scheduled.
Monday is the schedule, right?
What do we have to do on Monday? I mean, we might have much more to do on Wednesday, or might not.
Mr. Kimball?
Oh, yeah.
I got it marked on my calendar. I'll remember it Tuesday to sign.
I know you guys have looked at a bunch of different versions of this warrant, but just to bring it to your attention, I'm sure you catch it already. Article 8 is now the operating budget. That was originally Article 15.
Yeah.
And we've done that on purpose because if it does get to the town meeting and it does have to, we have to talk about an override, we didn't want to have it in the twilight hours of in the evening, so we moved that up a bit just to make it happen. Also, on some of the original warrants, and I heard a question earlier, that's why I'm bringing it up, there was a $100,000 request for revitalization of the town common, which I'm chairman of that committee also. And we withdrew that obviously for obvious reasons, we don't have any money, so we can't obviously ask you for cash you don't have. But I did want to talk to you about the activity that's been going on at the Common and the Trent Memorial the last couple of days. I heard some conversation earlier as I was coming up. We have a successful well drilled at the Trent Memorial. We went down about 160 feet. We hit ledge at 20 feet. 160 feet, we got 25 gallons per minute. We're thrilled to death. It's like the perfect irrigation well. It'll cost about $9,000 or less, just a little bit less than $9,000. That money was all raised through private funds. That's all donations, no cost to the town. On the common, we're down 300 feet. We've hit ledge, but we're not finding any water. So as of today, that's pretty much a dry one, which is surprising because I was told there was an underground river on the common and the other side of it was going to be nothing. Well, we're not finding any water under the common. So they did get down to about 300 feet. They will stop at 600 feet. At that point, they'll defrac. They'll start blowing holes in the ledge to see if they can move some water through it. We're hoping that they don't have to do that. And that project will probably cost, if we have to max it out, because after 400 feet, it starts becoming expensive at $15 a foot, and additional defracting is like $2,000. It's going to probably end up costing, could cost between $12,000 and $15,000 to do that one. Again, the money has been raised through private donations. It's no cost to the town, and we have plenty of money to cover it if it does happen. So I just want to bring you up to speed on those two. The town common fence, which is falling down, is part of the restoration project. Unfortunately, we don't have any money, so we're probably going to take it down. We now have permission from the Historic District Commission to take down the fence. And we have a company over in Taunton that can actually restore. They've shown us that they can actually take pieces of that 1865 fence and actually refurb it, sections of it. Other sections of it, there's no way we're ever going to be able to save them. They've been welded too many times, or there's too many issues with them. But we are in the process of probably going to be taking that fence down very shortly. It's becoming dangerous, and we're concerned that someone's going to get hurt. Memorial Day is coming very soon. It's always nice to have that confined area, but we may have no choice but to take it down ahead of time to make sure that someone doesn't get hurt. So. I just want to bring you up to date on this recent activity and to stress the fact that, again, this is not being funded by any town funds, so, okay?
Thank you.
360 feet. So your next meeting is?
Monday, 7 o'clock.
Okay.
What do we do on Monday?
Pardon me?
What do we do on Monday?
Whatever's left. We have a couple of articles that are still waiting.
Yeah, but we might have, are we going to meet Wednesday as well?
No.
We might,
Right, it depends on the vote.
but we need to post it.
You just want to
We
meet?
need to post Wednesday at least.
Well, I mean, well, why don't we just, does anyone have a conflict with Wednesday? Do you have? Yeah, we'll just do Wednesday.
We just meet Wednesday.
Just meet Wednesday and do whatever,
One-
get
one way or
busy
the
on
other.
whatever we have to get busy on.
Right, yeah, it's either,
If it's, we either change everything or we just add those articles and we're finished.
yeah, okay.
Be a short meeting.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Good point.
All right, so Wednesday,
We also,
the 26th.
we need to look at the copy of the draft or of the annual report, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. All right, one last item.
Minutes.
There was minutes and surface from October 17th, 2016.
You guys totally remember what happened that day?
Oh, yeah, I do. I've got a subjective to memory.
Oh, yeah.
Before you had the spell check on.
I'm glad you put preceding town meeting.
Yeah. That should help jog your memory.
God.
You know, that's when I first looked at it, and I seen Lee's name, and I said, wait a minute, this has to go back.
I know.
motion?
Make a motion to accept the minutes of October 17th, 2016.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? All right, I think that is everything for tonight.
26.
Jim, make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?